Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arcade Era Power Hour podcast, a podcast where I, Milo, and this guy
Gibbon.
talk about the arcade Donkey Kong era and its associated universe. But not this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few episodes ago, I mooted the idea of putting the Umihara Kawase series in the plug section, but decided to put it off because I hadn't finished it yet. And then afterwards, Gibbon and I agreed that we were both getting so into it that we had enough fodder to do basically an entire episode about it. So
That's an understatement.
that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
It's an off-topic episode.
It is. It's a very good series, though. It's very good. We're kind of obsessed. Oh.
Yes, we are.
But before that, we have some news roundup and some listener questions. As far as news goes, we actually have some news.
For once.
Yeah. Pauline is getting some more love in Mario Kart Tour. She has a wonderful new sort of 20s debutante look going on. I don't know, how would you describe that? She's got like the collar and the bouquet, like it was timed with Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I assume that's fake fur, but she's got a big furry muffler and a little red beret.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, it's still a red dress, but it has a gradient going up to a darker color as it goes up, and a bouquet of roses.
It's a good look. I don't think she's had a bad look in that game, honestly.
Agreed. I like the New Year's party one the best, but this is pretty cool too.
Yeah, the New Year's party is good. It makes me sad that she's getting all this love and attention in Mario Kart Tour, of all things.
Well, she was in Aces, and if they just sort of import models over, I think there's a decent chance she'll be in the recently announced Mario Golf.
That's
God, what's it called? Rush?
True.
What's it called again?
Mario Golf Super Rush or something?
Super Rush, okay.
Yeah. I don't know, I don't know if I have much faith that, like, the starting roster is going to be much more than what was shown in that preview. But I wouldn't be surprised if she's, like, additional content again.
Mm. Yep. Well, I have, like, on previous episodes, I kind of talk about how I was still playing Mario Kart Tour, but at this point I've stopped, and I haven't even launched the game since. Is she even in it now, or is it this is an announcement thing?
This event ended already, I think.
Oh, okay, so I've missed it, actually.
Like, she's obviously still there, but she's not the focus pipe. I think Funky Kong's actually on the focus pipe right now.
Weird.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that game. I know Heil finally got a new phone that's like a model more recent than 30 years ago, and has decided to try out Mario Kart Tour again since his battery can actually handle it. So, I don't know.
I hope it doesn't break him that, like, if after the 2 weeks has passed, you can't play that content again. So you can't really complete the game in the same way that you can with traditional games.
Don't let him know.
So yeah, this is the third time that Pauline has appeared in Mario Kart Tour. And yeah, maybe there'll be more in the future.
Oh, I super expect there to be more in the future, because they seem to be done adding new characters and just seem to be adding costumes for people.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. They've rolled out some new characters here and there, and like we do get stuff like Junior and Retro Mario. But yeah, they've been adding characters that require more than just like adding different clothes textures on people. And I'm being a little glib about that. Like, all of Pauline's costumes so far have required like rendering. It's not just slapping a different texture on the model. So it's not like there's no work involved or anything.
Yeah, and even new animations and voice clips sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of great how they've put like almost everybody in casual clothes now for some event or whatever. It's great seeing like Waluigi in slacks and a plaid shirt, you know.
Yeah. If you just have to spend hundreds of
Yeah, you
real
just
world dollars to actually get them all.
Yeah, that's the thing. Mario Kart Tour is amazing, except for how it's not. In another piece of news, we have what we are stubbornly going to insist is a Stanley the Bugman sighting.
Yeah.
In
Oh,
Mario
this is
Tennis.
our new segment, Stanley the Bugman Watch
Yeah,
2021.
Stanley Watch. In a Discord discussion with some other people, we were talking about the second Mario from Donkey Kong Jr.'s intro, and whether that was Luigi or not. And someone brought up the third Mario from Mario Tennis 64, where if you have a Mario versus Mario match, Mario is still the ref. And the color scheme for him while he's the ref is blue and white, which I immediately pointed out was Stanley's colors. So I'm going to call that a Stanley sighting and say that the ref in Mario Tennis 64 is Stanley.
Sure, it's close enough.
Yeah.
He's been depicted, in a similar way to Mario a lot of times with a big nose, squat stature. So I think it fits well enough. But is this enough evidence to declare that Stanley is the third missing Mario brother?
I don't know about that. We know Wario and Waluigi aren't actually related to Mario? I don't know. It's unclear. They go back and forth on that. But then they go back and forth on how many kids Bowser has. So,
8 at least. Plus the ones from Mario Party.
Yeah. Floating continuity. You just got to look at it like comic books. We had a golden age, silver age. We're in modern stuff. They reboot, rolling continuity. But yeah.
So Odyssey is the new 52.
I don't know about that. I don't think we had any big actual continuity shakeup. I think it's more of a continuity only matters X games back, and once you pass that threshold,
it's Vega. They'll never declare an actual reboot because it's not really important.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well that covers the news. We did get some listener questions, although I was pretty late in soliciting them.
We still got a decent amount though.
Yeah. So the first one comes from Kesmar from the DK Mine Outer Circle Discord. Who is Pink DK Jr.?
I think we've answered this before.
I think we have.
And I can't actually remember what I said because I was going to intentionally give a different answer this time.
I'll say my current answer is it's Candy Kong. Before she had a growth spurt.
That's
so, in other words, Candy became lanky, but Donkey has always been chunky. And Diddy is usually tiny.
I'm satisfied with that. Those were a bunch of words that'll make sense to people and not make sense to other people. That sounds about right. That's still way easier to follow than some game continuity. I've been watching a friend play through the Kingdom Hearts games, and it's just...
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yesterday, I got to the point where I just threw my hands up in the air. He finished up the Kingdom Hearts 3 yesterday and kind of left us all going, what the fuck? So, yeah. Yeah, I'll go along with Pink Donkey Kong Jr. is Candy. I'm down with that.
That's our answer for
now. She also has the junior on her leotard, doesn't she?
Yes.
That means there's a Candy Senior somewhere.
Oh, I see. I was going to say she just had hand-me-down clothes from Junior.
Yeah, that's also fair.
They shared clothes because they were the same size at the time.
Yes. The next question comes from our friend Tony, currently going by Professor Intelion or Professor Intonion in various parts of Twitter and the internet.
Friend of the show.
A friend of the show. And the question is, what is your opinion on Intelion? I shouldn't be super surprised by this question.
I'll say that none of the Gen 8 starters really wowed me, and I'm not really a fan of any of them. Inteleon, in particular, is kind of very lanky, which looks odd to me. But on the other hand, as with many things, Tony's enthusiasm and passion for the character and completely standing it to the nth degree has made me appreciate Inteleon to a significant degree.
Yeah. I will also say that they're Gigantamax, the bigger Max form. I don't know. I haven't played it.
Yes, Gigantamax.
Inteleon's is their tail becomes a tower from which they snipe off of, which is just kind of cooler than the other two ones, which just kind of get big and more so like most of the other Pokemon do. So having an actual like secret agent, super spy, sniper starter it's different. It's not just look, thing become bigger. So
Sniping's a good job, mate.
yeah. So that's our opinion on Inteleon.
Yes. It has the best Gigantamax form.
Yeah, basically.
And Julius R. Us, aka Michael Julius Peterson, asks us, what are your thoughts on the potential DK 40th anniversary celebrations / releases? Well, they haven't happened yet, Jules, so I have no opinion.
Yeah, they got like 4 months to do anything.
I guess he did say potential, so I'm not expecting anything because I will, if I do, I'll inevitably be disappointed because this sort of thing just doesn't really happen much.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since they didn't even acknowledge Zelda's. Like, a Skyward Sword re-release this year works as both a Skyward Sword 10th anniversary and a Zelda anniversary because Skyward Sword was an anniversary title to begin with.
Correct.
And they didn't mention that at all during the announcement.
Good point. But what are your wishes for a 40th anniversary thing? Maybe refer to our previous episode, an All Stars collection.
yeah, an All Stars collection would be nice. Other than that, I don't know. Like everything I'd want would kind of be there already. Maybe put Returns on Switch, so we've got like Returns and like DK64. So we just got like the whole series. Put the Donkey Kong Country games that aren't. Put everything on Switch. Just put it all on the Switch.
The other thing that I've always wanted is ports of the DKC games are good, but remaking the Donkey Kong Land games in the DKC style engine is something I always wanted.
Remaking games in updated engines is a thing right now and should be done with Donkey Kong titles.
Yeah. Okay. Does that about cover it then?
I think so.
Let's get into today's off-topic topic.
Yeah.
So, what is Umihara Kawase, and why are we talking about it?
It's really, really good. Is what it is. So, I don't know, where should we start with this? It's a television station wanted to put out a video game. In what do my notes say? In like the early 90s, in like 1992, they contracted some people to make a video game for them, and one of the best-selling arcade games of all time that was put out.
Donkey Kong.
Yeah.
And that's why we're talking
due
about
to
it.
the popularity of Donkey Kong and its sequels, other arcade game companies decided to try to do something unique and distinct to put their mark on the arcade industry, and a lot of titles tried and failed, but one in
Oh, yeah.
particular did really, really well. I think it's up in the top 5.
Pac-Man.
Yeah, Pac-Man. And that's what we're talking about today, the Pac-Man series. I think somewhere in the list, in the top 5 list, is a little title called Dig Dug,
Hmm.
which was very unlike anything else that was out on the market at the time, which were all sort of like Pac-Man was a maze thing. Donkey Kong was like the first platformer ever.
Yeah, debatable, but yeah.
Yeah. First of what we now understand platformers to be. Like, I know there's some discussion over whether Crazy Climber is a platformer or not, but yeah.
I'd say it definitely popularized the platformer genre.
Yeah.
And especially at the time, single screen platforming, puzzle platforming, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Dig Dug features this little guy digging around and defeating enemies either by digging out the space underneath boulders that would drop down on the enemies that are chasing him, or by shooting out a little pump hose, and then you have to actually pump up the enemies like a balloon and pop them via overinflation. And the enemies were, what were the enemies called? They're the little red goggle dudes,
Pukas.
pukas, and the other ones are what, Frygars, and they're just
Yeah, that's
straight
right.
up little dragons that breathe fire.
Mm.
And it was surreal and insanely popular, and it did well enough to get a sequel, which, in the grand tradition of sequels, was nothing like the original.
Completely changed up the gameplay, yeah.
Completely changed up the gameplay. Was still pretty popular, but not on the order of magnitude that the first one was. But the series definitely left its mark on the world, and is still kind of going today. The Mr. Driller games are like the DKC to the original's Donkey Kong, in that it's the next generation. Mr. Driller is the son of the Dig Dug character, and they've pulled in some of their other games they made into that expanded universe. So, like, Kissy from Baroduke is Mr. Driller's mom, for instance.
You're spoiling my upcoming connection chain.
Oh, I'm sorry. But anyway, so when this television station, which was TNN?
NHK.
NHK? A Japanese broadcasting company.
TNN is Sakai's company.
Okay.
And NHK is the broadcaster.
Yeah. So NHK, this broadcasting company, contracted TNN to make a video game, and they chose Mr. Driller as their inspiration. So they started by straight up making a Mr. Driller clone. Only instead of a little guy in like a diving suit type. Get up.
Did Mr. Driller exist then?
No, sorry, Dig Dug.
Dig Dug,
always get these titles mixed up. Make a Dig Dug clone. Only instead of a little dude in a suit, it was a young girl shoveling around, and their twist on it was that you'd be able to connect to a reservoir to flood the tunnels you were digging out.
So they had this water flowing physics system that they seem to be experimenting with and pretty enamored with, because that survived a couple of iterations of the prototyping phase.
The next major prototype was modeled after Dig Dug 2.
Which, as we said, was different. It was top down instead of side on, and had you drilling chasms in the ground to separate land masses.
Yeah.
So this still had water flow, but from top down.
Yeah. Instead of digging around with a shovel, you are now opening and closing water sluice gates to control the flow of water around, and that's how you defeat enemies. The enemies in this prototype were just straight up Dig Dug enemies.
Yeah, Pukas existed there in the artwork, in the prototype sprites, so it's clearly showing their inspiration.
They soon realized this wasn't that fun, and decided to move on to another prototype where they decided to expand on the hose pump thing from the original Dig
Mm.
Dug, where you'd shoot out your hose pump to attack enemies with. And that sort of evolved into a grappling hook instead of a hose. And you'd pull in enemies and shove them in your backpack to get rid of them.
Mm.
And then they were like, well, you've got a grappling hook, so why don't we use that to get around as well? And eventually turned into this game where the grappling hook was the main modus operandi for everything. So,
Yeah, at this point, the fish enemies had come in. The sort of iconic enemies of the series are a variety of fish with legs that walk around.
yeah.
And at this phase of the project, they were targeting release on the Sharp X68000 computer. But eventually, it ended up on the, I guess, more popular platform of the Super Famicom.
Yeah.
At this point, I would like to make the connection, since we've established the Dig Dug roots. On top of both Umihara Kawase and Doki Doki Panic taking place in a kind of dream world existence,
Ooh,
that's one connection for
good
you to the
connection.
arcade era. Otherwise, Donkey Kong. Okay, Donkey Kong, right? You've heard of that?
Yeah. I hope
So there's a lot of connections. Yeah, there's a lot of connections between DK and Metroid series. They were both worked on by the same developers, Nintendo R&D 1, NST, and Retro Studios. Later on in Tropical Freeze, we even see Samus's gunship and an Easter egg appearance by a Metroid itself. And then Namco made a game for arcades called Baraduke, which was a kind of scrolling shooter, but it was sort of their take on Metroid. It had a similar twist where in the end you find out that Kissy, the character you're playing, is a woman in a spacesuit, and you're shooting a bunch of aliens and stuff.
I'd just like to point out that Baraduke predates Metroid by over a year.
Oh, have I made that mistake before? Okay. Well, either way, they're similar-ish, so there's a tenuous link. And as we said, Baraduke characters. Well, so Kissy was re-established in Mr. Driller as Tobi Masuyo, the mother of the current Mr. Driller, Taizo Hori. Is that right?
Ask
I don't
Tony.
remember if that's the father or the son. So Baraduke made its way into Mr. Driller, and of course Mr. Driller is the successor to Dig Dug, and Dig Dug inspired Umihara Kawase. So there is a tenuous link of connections between Donkey Kong and Umihara Kawase.
Right. We reached Kevin Bacon
But-
in less than 5 steps.
Done it. Awesome. But we're actually just covering it because we want to and we like the series.
Yeah, it's great.
So, the first game. We're up to that point now. We've covered
Yes.
the prototyping, the development. The first game was released on the Super Famicom, only in Japan. And it's kind of reached this cult classic status now. At the time, since it had the backing of this big, rich television company, they were able to get the word out about this game. So like a lot of game shops all over Japan were sent these posters with a very striking image, just a white background and Kawase standing there with the title and the catchphrase and whatever, the catch copy. And I said catch copy, but I don't actually know if it had it or what it is. But anyway, was the catch copy just like rubbering action game?
It might have been. They use that
That's-
phrase a lot.
Yeah, they do, right next to the title, almost like it's a subtitle or something. But that kind of tells you what they were going for, the gameplay. But the sort of, the image of Kawase standing there kind of looking over a shoulder, it's very, it fits well with the sort of surreal,
Yeah.
introspective tone
you
of
could-
the game itself.
Yeah, you could put like the Neon Genesis Evangelion logo over that, and it wouldn't be out of place.
And of course, it shows off Toshinobu Kondo's character design, and he's an
Yeah.
important figure in the series. He designed characters for the whole series, and later on kind of took over as director of the franchise at a certain point. But in the first title, the director and main driving force of the game itself was this guy called Kiyoshi Sakai.
Yeah.
He was director, programmer, map designer, and he did a lot of duties on this game. It really seems to be a passion project on his behalf, as well as the other people involved.
I believe Kondo was actually only hired to do that poster on the original.
Really? Okay, interesting.
But he was on board from the beginning after, like, for the rest of it.
Yeah, I did notice that the color scheme of Kawase doesn't match up with some of the other illustrations in the manual, and especially the sprite on screen, which looks quite different. But he did do some other illustrations in the manual, at least.
Yeah, like, her look had been kind of established already in the prototypes, but I know that, like, his major piece of artwork for the original release was that poster. He may have contributed the, like, manual art and stuff too. I'm not sure about that, but it's pretty on model with what's in later games as well.
So if there's one thing the series is known for, it's the surreal atmosphere and the kind of weirdness of it all. If there's two things it's known for, it's crushing difficulty. If there's three things it's known for, it's the rubbering action. It's the wire-based gameplay.
Yes.
So,
for a more mainstream example of this type of gameplay, you may have heard of a series called Bionic Commando. That's really the only other franchise that does this regularly. Lots of games will have, like, a grappling hook that you can fire off and swing from, like it shows up in Metroid and Mega Man and various other titles. But these are really the only two franchises where everything is built around these mechanics, and it's actual, like, there's physics involved. You can shorten and lengthen your grapple and swing around, and you kind of gotta work up your momentum and get yourself over ledges and attack and grab and whatnot with them. So.
And Bionic Commando even had some combat. I guess Kawase has combat, right? Because you're capturing the fish and you're getting assaulted by these creatures often.
In the early games, it's a lot of indirect combat. Like, the bosses were all, like, getting them to hurt themselves or something.
Or just wander off.
Yeah. But yeah, so, like, if you took Bionic Commando and replaced the hard-hitting action 80s movie star with a high school girl and took out all the guns and replaced all the Nazis with fish with legs.
Well said.
Yeah, that would be still not a great description of what's going on there.
Because a lot more than Bionic Commando, it's about getting around the stage, and there's kind of blocks floating in space, and you really have to master the physics system of this stretchy, bouncy, swingy lure hook rope thing to get around and to not die, and death will come frequently. In the first couple of games, you had 10 lives, and you had to go through the whole game with those. And within the fields, you had, like, there's a door to get to the next stage, right? But there's alternate doors to go on alternate routes. And then people have drawn up maps of the progression through the game, how there's this vast interconnecting web of levels that certain doors take you back and forth through certain areas. But if you take too long, if you take more than half an hour to beat the game, you get sent to, like, an alternate final stage. So
you can get sent to an alternate final stage. It's not guaranteed. I don't even know how you last half an hour in this.
The structure of the first two games is really demanding.
Because, like, you've got less than 5 minutes per stage, so to, like, even rack up half an hour, like, I don't know, it's beyond me.
The cult classic status of the game landed it a spot on the popular Japanese gaming show Game Center CX with Shinya Arino. And if you watch that episode, I'd recommend it. It's very good. And he he doesn't understand the game at all, and it's very funny. Yeah, but like I'd say that the game doesn't do a great job of explaining how to play it. The manual does tell you some of the more advanced techniques.
Yeah.
But it can be really hard to get a grip on, especially for new players.
And like it does have these sort of not attract mode, but sort of little animations before some of the early levels that show you some of the basic mechanics, and they introduce them one by one. Like, here's firing off your rope and hooking onto things, and here's capturing enemies, and here's jumping. And like pulling yourself up ledges, and like
that helps a lot.
It introduces all those, and then gets into some of the more advanced techniques, like grappling the floor below you, letting out a lot of line, and then swinging yourself off the ledge, sort of stuff. Like I think it does a good job of sort of displaying those things, but like, even though I say advanced technique, that's a really basic technique and isn't going to help at all in later levels.
It gets a lot more advanced than that. I always say the series has a really high skill ceiling.
Yeah.
And I've only seen half to 2/3 of the levels in any of these early games, because you really do need to master those advanced techniques to get further. And I'm talking advanced techniques like climbing a vertical wall, which is a lot harder in this original game.
I'm getting better.
Or rocket boosts, where you grab onto the floor and then sort of pull yourself away and jump so that the elasticity pulls you back the other way, and then you get increased running speed.
I'm not getting better at that at all.
I've done it once in Fresh and once in Sayonara, I think.
Fresh showed you how to do it. Like, it had a little,
it did.
Here's a thing, practice doing this, and then I never got the hang of it and managed to get through the entire game without it. But Fresh is structured differently.
Yeah, I don't think the first game teaches you about those things.
Nope.
I don't think it even teaches, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it even teaches you to reel the line in as you swing to gain more momentum from your swing.
Nope.
Which is really, really important to learn.
Yep. That's like a really basic thing, and they don't tell you about that.
Yeah, I think one of the later games does tell you that. And
yeah, it doesn't.
So
later games do a good job of sort of having the default route be on the short side, but the default route in the original game is like one of the longer paths through the game.
It's really tough. Yeah.
I can get about halfway through it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I recommend playing one or more of the later games first before returning to the early one.
Yes.
But before we talk about the later games, I guess we should cover the ports of this game. So it was on the Super Nintendo.
Yes.
The second game got a port to the DS, and the first game was included on that as a double pack. And that added features that would later become more standard in the series, like stage replay mode, where you can freely play any of the stages you've unlocked to practice them.
That didn't actually get added to the Super Nintendo one until the next part.
Oh, okay, my mistake.
But
it's complicated, this whole release history. The games do always have the feature of recording your gameplay.
Yeah, that was sort of part of its cult status. Was it was a very early, like, it allowed you to record speedrun attempts in game. Like, it had menu features for it, and it would save replays for you. And it's the only title I've ever heard of that supported that earlier than like modern games. So yeah.
So after the DS port, later on, as you say, it was included on the Vita re-release of the third game, and that's when they added the stage select stuff,
the practice mode.
And more recently, it's gotten a release on the PC, Steam for Windows.
Yes.
Which is a good way to play it, although you don't get access to emulation save states. So maybe playing an earlier version is better for that. So
the practice mode, which lets you practice any stage you've already gotten to, is pretty much the only feature that's been added in later ports. So if you don't mind about that, go ahead and emulate it.
Yeah.
It's still using the original graphics. It's at its original frame rate. No other real improvements have been made to it. So
Yeah. There's some nice interface options in the new port. Actually, speaking of the interface, one of the weird things about this first game, or the first couple of games even, is the UI is drawn really far on the inside of the screen.
yeah,
So it's like there's an overscan region, but it's half the space of your TV screen. Like the score is drawn like basically just above your character. It's really bizarre.
yeah,
And the fact that it has a score kind of betrays its arcadey roots.
yeah.
Even
It's very arcadey.
you get certain points for capturing different fishes and stuff. Do you want to go into the dark backstory now? Because I think it was published on Sakai's website around the time of Shun's release, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
there's not
and
too many years between them.
yeah, we should, because like this is also when the manga was coming out and he was selling doujins a lot. This game, like it was a bit of a flop commercially, but it did really well in the secondary market. Like it had a syndicated manga that did well enough to get published in a tankobon. It
Almost all of it was published.
Kondo famously sold enough doujin material from this game to help finance the second game in the series. And yeah, there was
That's
a
so
really
cool.
dark and broody backstory to this surreal happy-go-lucky of a young girl grappling hooking her way around these surreal landscapes and interacting with legged fish.
Yeah, you say young, but I think I don't know if it's a retcon, but later on they say that she's 19 years old at this stage.
I
Also,
want to
that
say she's 19 in at least Shun, but I don't necessarily know about this first game because he said in an interview for Sayonara that Kid Kawase was sort of a callback to this early game.
but you can even get in Sayonara a costume based on the first game as well, and that's
Yeah,
just a
it's
skin over the
yeah.
existing model. Yeah, so it's a little unclear, but yeah, the backstory is super grim. It's full of like emotional turmoil
Yeah,
and death and stuff.
like worthy of Alan Moore. Well, maybe not that bad, but
Yeah, the basic gist of it is that both her parents were chefs, and her father was like a real gourmet, high-end kind of sushi chef kind of thing, where he was pursuing perfection, and this caused him to travel a lot and go looking for the next best ingredient or recipe or whatever. And the mother was a bit more down to earth and worked in like a family style small time restaurant, just doing wholesome home cooked meals kind of thing. And this is kind of the conflict that shapes Kawase's life, I guess. There's the added detail as well that the parents separated because of their idealistic conflicts. And
yeah.
Kawase has a sister who she doesn't even know about, who lives with the mother because she was born after they separated or something.
Lived
And
with the
yeah, Kawase lived with her father and the sister lived with her mother. Some of this is contradicted by later games, so it's just a bit unclear whether it really applies at all. But and yeah, so her father went traveling, but while like journeying in the mountains, he went missing, presumed dead. And Kawase is kind of doing the same thing and following in his footsteps, either to follow his trade or maybe to find him wherever he is. But in the process, she ends up working at her mother's restaurant unknowingly.
yeah.
Like she doesn't remember her mother, so she ends up getting a job for her as she's traveling, but she doesn't know it's her mother. And by this point, her sister has unfortunately passed away due to improper preparation of fugu blowfish and dying from the poison. I think that was the implication. Yeah,
I believe that's what it was.
So
And
yeah.
there's a whole thing where like they realize they're mother and daughter, and Kawase is overcome by emotion and has to leave, and yada yada. It's just really depressing. And
Yeah, very melodramatic and overwrought.
everyone was kind of
Um,
like, "You're telling me that's the backstory for this game? What?" It'd be like if
and
Kirby was about some Cthulian entity that's trying to bring entropy to the. Oh wait.
oh wait,
Um,
it is. And yeah, this doesn't really come into the games, like I said, but it sort of informs and gets reinterpreted by some of the
yeah.
story elements in Fresh.
It
Uh,
it kind of gets alluded to, and the
hmm.
meta commentary gets alluded to as well in Blade Strangers of all things.
Oh yeah, true, true,
So
true. When they start adding these story elements back in, yeah.
yeah,
But I guess the point is that the world that the first game takes place in is some kind of dreamscape or imaginary world that is inside of Kawase's own soul, and it's a way of her dealing with her internal struggles and being represented by
yeah.
this kind of difficult gameplay
hmm
loop and being attacked by fish all the time.
But later entries have sort of muddied how much of it is in Kawase's head or not.
Well, it's always very vague and open to interpretation, which I think is a strength because people will have
Yeah, that's
different
true.
theories and different ideas about it.
hmm That also pops up in Blade Strangers, where other characters are like, "What? I thought you said this was all going on in her head. Why is there a giant fish here?"
Yeah, let's talk about the second game now.
Yes.
Mm.
Um.
So it was only a few years later
hmm
that they created Umihara Kawase Shun on the PlayStation.
It's sometimes
And
referred to as Umihara Kawase seasonal in some places.
right, that's kind of the translation of Shun, or a translation. And like Gibbon said, Toshinobu Kondo's sales of Dojin, with artwork of the character and stuff, is partially what funded this next game
Yeah.
and the new studio, because at this point TNN had transitioned into Jackpot.
Yes. I don't know. They transitioned
Yes,
into like 5 different studios over the
they
years.
did. Yeah, after that they ended up becoming Studio Saizen-sen, which persists to this
Yes.
day.
Yes.
So they have a new publisher on board, Xing Entertainment.
hmm
And on top of the Dojin funding, apparently they also had to seek funding elsewhere because there's actually advertisements in the game
Yeah.
for a tea company and a fishing supply company, which is very amusing and have the sort of animated
Like
version of Kawase hanging out using the product voiceover with her endorsing it.
yeah, they're actual like they're television commercials. It's Kawase like
Yeah,
holding up some of the tea and going, "Oh yes,
yeah.
refreshing tea from brand blah blah," or using the fishing equipment from the fishing company, and they're great. That like
Yeah,
it's surreal. I love it. It reminds me of Snake looking at the camera and talking about how much he loves this food ration he's eating.
calorie mate.
Yeah, yeah, you know.
Yes, exactly.
Um,
It's really interesting.
and yeah, Shun is on it released on the PlayStation this time, and due to
Yep.
the more powerful system they were able to do some cool stuff with the graphics. So the level geometry is 3D, but the rest of it is sort of billboarded. I don't want to say sprites because all of the art done in the game is done with Copic marker.
Mm. Yeah, it's like hand drawn animation frames that have then been digitized for the game.
Yeah,
It's really cool.
and
It's a really good look. It's
I'm
actually my favorite look
yeah, it's
of the series.
yeah, agreed. It's got a very distinct look and it's great, and I wish they'd go back to it. I'm not exaggerating about the Copic marker, by the way. He
Mm.
Kondo confirmed that in one of the art books, and showed some photos of like his workstation with some of those original like Copic marker prints he'd done that were then like scanned in and
Oh,
used
that's
in the game.
fantastic. Yeah, nice.
And I can't unsee it now, but it's just so beautiful. It's great.
Mm. And it kind of speaks to the greater focus here on the visual design, because the first game was quite bare bones in its visuals.
Yeah.
But yeah, here they're putting Kondo's designs more to the forefront in his artwork. They do still keep the digitized photographs for the backgrounds, which is something I failed to mention for the first game. But both of them have these sort of washed out pictures of real landscapes that have been digitized for the backdrops, and it adds to that sort of odd mix of styles visually for this game.
Yeah. So the second game also didn't have any presented story. It was very similar in structure to the first, in that it was a series of levels you go through with branching paths, and there was the occasional odd boss. Most of the bosses in the second game are returning from the first game, although there's some new ones that become mainstays of the series. And the game just sort of ends in places like you'll go through a door and that was the end and the credits roll. It wasn't even a boss stage. Congratulations.
Kind of sneaks up on you.
But the physics were a bit different, and the focus was less on the sort of get to the end in time and don't die, and more on sort of the puzzle of how do I get from point A to point B. It was a bit more casual in its approach. I think it's much more approachable than the original, and I actually like playing it a lot more than the original.
I absolutely agree. They also added a couple of little features, like because of the PlayStation's double shoulder buttons, they have this thing where you can press L and R1 to shoot upwards diagonally, or L and R2 to shoot downwards diagonally, and that kind of helps. It's a little nice feature to have.
Nice little quality of life improvements. This one,
you mentioned the bosses, and we should say that one of the more iconic aspects of the series is this giant tadpole. It's usually the first boss you'll encounter on any of the basic routes. It's a huge tadpole with legs that jumps around, and you have to scoot under it and kind of hang off the edge to avoid it. But then it lays eggs which hatch into tiny frogs, which is kind of the opposite way around to
and
how
that just sort of
it should be.
Is a nice emblematic look at the series surrealism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, it's a really cool game. We mentioned the commercials and stuff. This actually got a second release on PlayStation. So I guess it sold kind of well because they re-released it with some bug fixes, some new stages added, and all the commercials have been removed on the second edition. And replaced with images, artwork, pictures that you can see.
And this came with a fully animated, I guess you'd call it, music video. Like there was a special edition release that came with a soundtrack that you could also put in your computer as a CD-ROM that had this video animation on it, which you can sort of see in game, in that Kawase is watching it during the credits, but it's shrunken down on a little TV screen she's watching. And if you want to see like the full version of it, you have to watch this music CD-ROM that came with the original release of the game, or look it up on YouTube. But like they did work for this game. Like again, it got a lot of support and backing, and became like added to the cult classic status of the series.
And this is only a couple of years after the first game. So as for later releases, the publisher, I guess, farmed out a port to the PSP to another developer. According to... Go on.
Yeah, I was about to say that this PSP port is the only one that doesn't have that Studio Saizensen wasn't involved with.
Right. Yeah, it was sent out to another developer, but by all accounts, they kind of screwed it up. The physics are wonky, and there's new bugs and stuff.
I've heard the physics are bad. I've heard there's a lot of bugs. They changed the perspective. Like, it's still Shun, but they changed the perspective to be a little isometric instead of straight side on.
Hmm.
So that like you can kind of see the tops of the platforms you're walking on and stuff. I don't know why they did that. It messes with like the aiming and stuff when you're trying to
Hmm.
do jumps and slings. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was supposed to get an English release and sold so poorly and got so much fan backlash that it was canceled.
Yes.
Um,
One thing I did like about it that it was in widescreen, so you could see
yes.
more of the play field at once. I
I,
always like when a port does that.
I actually ordered a copy of it because I'm crazy
Oh,
and I ordered
you are.
every release in this series. Um, and I'm going to sit down and play the PSP version because watching videos of it and not being like I've only been playing these games for a couple months now, so I'm not quite so up on things that I can immediately spot like physics differences.
Hmm.
So I'm
Yeah.
interested to see if me, a layman who's just getting into the series, will be able to like actually spot physics differences for the
Hmm.
rope physics and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
So yeah, from what I've read, I think it was Kiyoshi Sakai, the driving force of the series at this point, when he saw how the negative reception of the PSP port, he was like, right, I got to come back and fix this. Kind of like how Toriyama responding to Dragon Ball Evolution got him to come back for Battle of Gods. So he came back and was responsible for the DS port, which is fantastic. If you
Yes.
get any release in the series, the DS one is the way to go. It's Japanese exclusive, like most of the series up till this point.
Yes.
But it includes the first two games. It's got like a gallery feature, so every fish you catch goes into a little library with a nice image, and yeah, it's got other features, artwork, and stuff like that, and extra stages.
Yeah. When Milo says it has the first two games, it not just the first two games, it includes both versions of Shun in it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're actually getting kind of three different games.
They reworked some of the stage designs for Shun to suit the slightly smaller screen of the DS.
Yeah. But it also has the second edition version of things in there as well.
It doesn't have the commercials though.
No, it doesn't. And it also doesn't have that animation. That kind of annoys me.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yes, excellent version of these games.
Oh, sorry. I guess the only thing it doesn't have is the diagonal lure shooting.
Yeah, it doesn't do
Unfortunately,
the shoulder button thing. It's still my favorite way to play. It's the my preferred way to play the first two games.
Yeah, mine too. But it, like the first game, it did eventually get a port on PC through Steam. So yep, it's all there. Supports the original developers.
And so so all these ports of the second game kind of happened over the course of, oh lordy, what does it say in my notes? So the original version of Shun came out in early 97, and the second edition came out in 2000, and then Portable came out in 2008, and then the DS version came out in 2009. But it was thanks to the DS version happening as a response to the PSP version that they decided there was enough interest in the series to make a third game.
Yeah, and the third game is really interesting. So the second game, Shun, kind of started as a remake of the first game for PlayStation, but as it went on, they decided to add more stages and stuff. The third game is really from the ground up a new game, and they've rethought some of the conventions of the series. The main thing that I like about it compared to the old ones is you don't have that structure where you have a limited number of lives and you have to really struggle to survive through them and find the secret route to get to certain stages. This time it's just a simple menu. If you find an exit, you unlock a new stage, and then you can go and select that stage and do it as many times as you want.
Yeah.
And go to whatever stage you want in that order.
There's also
it's a lot more friendly.
Limit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And this is where kind of story starts happening. in the series a
Yeah,
little bit.
sort of.
There's characters in this game. There's other playable characters, and there's little character profiles that sort of gives you a bit of their background and adds a little bit of story to the game, which we actually know easily because this was also the first game in the series to get an English release.
Eventually. Did we say this was called Sayonara Umihara Kawase? I don't think we said that yet.
It was kind of intended as like a wrap up because they
Hence the
didn't.
name Farewell.
So they didn't know if there was going to be anything else after this. The original Western localization was localized as Yumi's Odd Odyssey, Yumi with a Y, instead of Umihara Kawase. But all subsequent ports and re-releases of Sayonara have kept the original Sayonara Umihara Kawase title.
Including the European localization,
Yeah.
which was separate from the American one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you mentioned the extra characters. They're really interesting.
Yeah, that's one way
On
of
top
putting
of on top of like a bunch of different costumes for Kawase from past games, you also unlock the child version of her where she's a little midgy person wearing an oversized t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
But you also get her childhood friend Emiko, who has like a cute Mola Mola style lure.
Yeah.
But each character also has like a different ability. So the main ability that people have is this time stopping feature.
Yeah.
In midair, you press the shoulder button and it pauses, and you can angle your shot and set it up properly at the right spot, just to help you with some of the tricky jumps and grabs.
I mean,
I don't find it helped that much, to be honest. Yeah.
I usually do it on accident and panic and get no use out of it because it's just messed up my momentum.
The child characters Emiko and young Kawase have a checkpoint ability, so I use them the most, letting you get partway through a stage and then restart from there instead of doing the whole stage again, which is, again, still a lot better than redoing the whole game again.
And
but
then there's one more character,
yes.
Noko... What is Noko's last name?
Yokoyama.
Yeah, Noko Yokoyama, who is a time-traveling sci-fi cop from the future who is Umihara Kawase's descendant. Yes, I just said that.
So you've got her past with her childhood friend and her future with her descendant meeting in this world. But like that's not really covered in the game. They just sort of exist in the game and they are who they are.
I say they start adding some story here. We just covered the extent
story,
of the story.
but no plot.
Yeah. they do establish some things, like when the profile for young Kawase mentions that like her memories of her childhood are really fuzzy. Like she doesn't remember a whole lot of what went on. But she remembers her childhood friend Emiko. And like you get a little blurb about Emiko and her cat Shakamaru.
Oh yeah.
And who isn't seen in this game but shows up later in the series.
And she's Norwegian.
She's half Norwegian.
Okay.
Yeah. A very, very popular trope in anime to have a half returnee friend or something. Foreign, but not too foreign.
I was just thinking how Lupin is half French and like Snake is half. Solid Snake you mentioned before, he's half.
He's American Japanese, I think. Or
yeah.
That was the original intention, but I think that got retconned later when they made Ava his mom. But yeah, so they kind of add these background details, but the game itself doesn't have any story. It's just kind of business as usual.
Noko has instead of time stop, she has time slow, which gives you a little bit more control to make a shot, but I didn't find it that useful. Like I read that it's a useful ability, but in practice I didn't really find that.
We're not high enough level players for that to apply to us. And another change this game made was it's entirely in 3D.
Yes.
Everyone is rendered out models as opposed to beautiful 2D Copic marker art.
Hmm. And they
Um,
look a little odd with their proportions.
yeah, they're all chibi. Like all the concept art of them is like normally
Hmm.
proportioned human anime art. But in game, they're like the same proportions as the previous game's sprites. So,
They did redesign them quite a bit for the Vita port, actually.
yeah, they did overhaul the models and everything for that.
The other thing they changed here was the boss fights. Instead of just being this sort of vague survival
Oh,
challenge
that's
thing,
true.
you have to do something that kind of knocks something down and then does
Yeah.
damage to the boss. And they usually, in 3 hits, they're defeated.
So in the original and Shun, the way you encountered the giant tadpole was it would kind of go back and forth across its stage and do its thing, and you would just kind of stay out of its way and let it hurt itself on some spikes in the area until it eventually left. In this game, you have to actively get it to chase you over to a position where you can, like, pull a lever to drop a frying pan on its head. And you have to do that like 3 times to deplete its health. Just to give you an example of how, like, combat has changed over the course of the series at this point.
Yeah, so this is kind of the end of the classic quote unquote trilogy, even though
Yeah.
there was, a decade, or like you said, the DS port led to this.
Yeah.
So there's a few years between them. But yeah, it's an interesting way to end that era of the franchise, and it's probably the best one to start with for a newbie,
Yeah,
I think.
it's the easiest to get a hold of because it's still on the 3DS eShop if you want to play there. It
And the
also,
PSN Vita store.
yeah, yeah, it also got a Vita release, which was also localized. It got 2 Vita re-releases actually. It got
Mm,
Sayonara Kawase Plus or Chirari
mm,
on the Vita, and then Sayonara Kawase Umihara Kawase Plus Plus on
mm.
Vita, which added a little bit more stuff and got a physical release in the West.
Yeah, I think the plus plus one was exclusive to physical, one of those limited run type companies.
Yes.
And the only thing it adds is a couple more artworks in the gallery. So it's not essential, I would say, but it's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, and if you want to see the artworks from the gallery, they're actually all available to view on kawasefan.net, which is a cool website
Yes.
that we
Yes.
found useful
And like we
in our
said,
fandom here.
all of these are on Steam. They're actually bundled together as the Umihara Kawase trilogy.
Yep.
Can pick them up. That's probably the easiest way to play them for most people.
Mm.
There have been a number of other like mobile ports and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say that a big change going from 3DS to Vita was they went from 30 FPS to 60 FPS. And
Yes.
when I tried both, I really noticed it was a big improvement. The other thing that they added in the PC port, so the 3DS one clearly has 3D visuals, right? I find it a little disorienting with the camera system in that game because it can kind of move around a little bit. Like you were saying with the PSP port of Shun, how the camera angle makes things a little tough. With this one, how it moves around, I found that a little tough. But if you want to make it even harder on yourself, there's a VR mode in the PC Steam port.
Yes.
If you have a headset, I think they were even considering doing a first-person view, kind of as
I
a
think,
novelty. I don't know if
yeah.
that's in the final release.
I think it's in the final release, but
Right.
not accessible unless you tunnel into like debug options.
Right. I've seen a video of it and it's bizarre.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to do it.
It's certainly not going to help you play the game.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll put it that way.
Mm.
Yeah, and that was like Sayonara came out in 2013 and got ported to the Vita in 2015, but that was sort of it for a hot minute.
Mm. Yeah, between like after that, at some points, Kiyoshi Sakai left Studio Saizen, he's not involved in the series anymore. So at this point, Toshinobu Kondo kind of became the steward of the franchise. And at Saizen, that then led to further developments.
Yeah, they made some other games. They worked on some of the Shining Force series spin-offs.
Yep. They helped Payon make Glory of Heracles DS.
Yeah. And sort of segueing into the next major Umihara Kawase related thing, the Shining games they worked on were Shining Hearts, which was sort of a spiritual successor to another game Kondo had worked on, Doki Doki Poyachio, which came out like a year or so after Umihara Kawase Shun on the PlayStation, and was intended to be sort of like an Animal Crossing competitor, but never really took off. And he sort of made the same game again, but with Shining characters this time.
Oh, right. Interesting.
And Shining Hearts is that. It's sort of you live in this town and work at a bakery, and it's sort of a Kiki's Delivery Service-esque setting where like airships exist and magic creatures and witches and stuff. Like
witches,
there's a couple young witches in training in the village, and you just kind of gotta interact with people and gain their friendship and stuff. And there's enemy encounters, but you don't do any real combat. But in Shining Hearts, being a Shining Force game, there's now real combat. But you're still working at a bakery, and they really just made the same game again. But then the next Shining game they made was Blade Arcus from Shining, a fighting game in the style of ArcSys Works Guilty Gear or BlazBlue type games, using a bunch of characters from Shining Hearts. And then it's gotten, in typical fighting game fashion, a million updates and re-releases that add more and more characters. But this eventually led to a non-Shining Blade game, Blade Strangers, featuring a bunch of Studio Saizensen's original characters, such as Umihara Kawase and Emiko and Noko. And this was published in conjunction with Nicholas. So it ended up including a bunch of Nicholas-owned characters as well, such as Isaac from The Binding of Isaac and Curly and Quote from Cave Story, and a bunch of other characters, as well as characters from some other Studio Saizen titles like Code of Princess and whatnot.
And Pia from Piaggio was added in an update.
From Piaggio. But this was kind of a major Umihara Kawase game in the fact that this is where we finally get story for all these characters. Kawase's route through story mode actually references that dark and gloomy backstory we were talking about like half an hour ago. And like kind of talks about that and how she's sort of stuck in her own head and running away from reality and going through these things. And it gives fleshes out Emiko and Noko as characters and lets us see Shakamaru, who is not a normal cat.
Not in this world.
Not in this world.
He's a giant cat and Emiko rides on his back.
Yeah. And just sort of, it has more Umihara Kawase story than the 3 previous Umihara Kawase games combined in it. And also did a really good job of sort of bringing these characters more into public consciousness, since Nicholas did a lot of promotional advertising and stuff for this.
Yeah, and its nature as a crossover gets a lot of people interested in it, I guess. Yeah.
Like Shovel Knight was in this, which is originally the entire reason I picked up the game before I'd even heard of Umihara Kawase. Right. I was like, oh my god, it's a fighting game with Shovel Knight in it. So like I picked it up and it was in a bundle with Code of Princess. So like I owned those two before I'd ever heard of Studio Saizensen, even though they made both of these games.
There's like 5 Code of Princess characters in this game, and they position Solange as kind of the protagonist of the story, kind of.
Yeah, that's not unreasonable to say.
Yeah, the game has a story mode, and you can play it as any character, but I was kind of let down by how, for most of the characters, the plot is just the same. There's 2 variations of the plot, and what happens is always being hijacked by, you know, humanoid computers and an all-encompassing
Yeah.
virtual reality. It's all kind of nonsense and silly, but
Yeah.
like you say, they do have these moments of character interaction and introspection that shed a lot of light on these characters from the Kawase series.
Yeah.
Especially at a climactic moment, there's a bit where they sort of look inside themselves. Why am I doing this? What have I been doing? Why am I here? And they have this personal realization. And for Noko, it's like her father died on a case because he was a detective, and now she's a time cop, and she wants to go back in time and save him. And for Kawase, it's interesting.
It alludes to that backstory we were talking about and how she needs to stop running away from reality. But we mentioned that Paya from Doki Doki Piacho was added in an update. One of the other characters added in an update was Summer Kawase, who's called Sexy Kawase in Japanese, but it's Kawase in like a bikini. And her entire story is a meta commentary on people going like, wait, what the hell? Why does Umihara Kawase have this dark and brooding backstory? Because she is how she is an embodiment of how people view Kawase. So she's always cheerful and bubbly and is trying to get rid of the original because we shouldn't have dark things in this series.
Yeah, that's amazing, especially when they interact, because you get
Yeah.
Kawase saying things like, life is pain, I'm always struggling, and everything is awful. And someone Kawase is like, you're everything that's dark and evil, and I need to destroy you so that I can be good and happy.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a trip. And if she wins, the world ends because she's not the real version of the character.
Yep.
I also like that this game sort of establishes a casual relationship between the Umihara cast and the Cave Story cast because they end up crossing over a lot after this. I think, yeah, like the next couple games Kawase's in also feature Cave Story characters and interactions between them. So,
Before we go there, though, my favorite thing about Blade Strangers is that Noko has a cybernetic tonfa that she fights with, and it's amazing.
yeah, they lean into her like future sci-fi cop stuff. So she's got a lot of cool high-tech gadgetry that she uses. And also one of the funniest character interactions was when she tries to arrest Kawase thinking she's the fugitive she's been looking for, and runs a scan on her and realizes that Kawase is her ancestor, and is like, "Oh crap! You're free to go. Take care of yourself. Go have some kids. I wasn't here. Forget all about this." Good stuff. But yeah, this kind of, I guess, I don't know if I want to say reinvigorated, but it invigorated interest in the series and who Kawase was and the games she was from. And I think, like, Nicholas was interested at this point too, because they had sort of a working relationship with Studio Saizensen for a while after this, which led to Kawase guest appearing in one of their other titles, and sort of, I don't know if directly led to, but was a factor in the next game in the series happening,
Mm.
which sort of brings us to Umihara Kawase Fresh. Umihara Kawase Fresh is relatively recent. It's came out in 2019
Mm.
on Switch and PS4 and PC.
Yeah, although there was a bit of a delay. I think Switch was first, and then the other ports came later.
Yeah, that sounds right. Um,
And it's even getting an arcade port even more recently.
uh, yeah, I think it already technically got that, though its
Mm.
rollout was halted or at least impeded by the plague
Mm.
happening.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't noticed, every game in the series has now been on both Nintendo and PlayStation consoles. So, um, good working relationship with those two, I guess.
I guess so.
But yeah, this one was a little different. It's I don't know if I'd call it straight up a Metroidvania approach,
Mm.
but it
Well,
had one big world map,
yeah.
and you got quests to do.
Yeah, this is the weird
But
thing about it.
yeah,
Because it is an open world style structure to the game world, but you don't
yeah,
explore it as an open world. You select missions from a menu, and then you're put somewhere in that world, and you have to get to another part of it. And from there, you do have a bit of choice over what route you take to get there through the obstacles of the world. But you're never really given a chance to explore it the way I was hoping you would.
well, yeah. There's no just like you're not on a mission, you get to go explore sort of thing. But
Mm.
you are like there's no time limit or anything. You're
Mm.
free to just go off and do whatever.
Yeah.
And I have done that and encountered like some very powerful like mini boss enemies because I was clearly not doing the mission.
Mm. And there
um,
are little bonus collectibles to find scattered around as well that are
yeah,
sometimes really difficult to get to.
yeah. So like you're kind of free to wander off and do whatever in the
That's true.
course of your completing the quest you're on, and sometimes you have to because this game adds a hunger meter and cooking system
Mm.
as sort of. I saw someone on the Kawase fan Discord talking about the hunger meter being a disguise for the time limit
Mm.
on missions because as your hunger runs out, if your hunger runs out, your health will start draining. But like you can make a recipe or just eat some raw ingredients and get your hunger meter back.
Yeah, at any
And
time.
I was rarely, if ever, low enough on ingredients that I was going to be like, well, guess I'll
Yeah.
just die. So
Yeah, it sometimes has weird interactions with checkpoints and your hunger meter, so you have to eat before
yeah,
activating a checkpoint.
it
But
it reinterprets a bunch of stuff from the series. Like
mm,
Kawase's backpack has
mm,
been scattered around as like extra lives in previous entries, but in this they are used as the resource you use at campsites to set up a checkpoint.
mm,
Or like you've been throwing enemies in your backpack the entire series, well now doing that converts them to raw ingredients to make food out of.
mm. And you can make more camp sets using ingredients as well. And so it
Yeah.
all kind of ties in together, gathering ingredients by picking up things from the world or by picking up the enemy
Hmm.
creatures, cooking, restoring your health. The health system, that's new. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really like that not dying in one hit thing.
Hmm. And I like all of these changes in theory, but it's
Mm,
a bit rough around the edges, you know?
yeah, I get what you mean. It's a little half-baked
Hmm.
food pun. Um, but I like that the different food items you make can give you buffs, and then you unlock new
Yes.
recipes as you progress that can give you
Hmm.
different kinds of buffs. I usually just
Yeah.
did the ones that helped with platforming, extending your
Hmm.
lure, or giving you a higher jump. Eventually, you unlock a double jump buff, which I then used exclusively for the rest of the game because it's amazing.
Yeah, pretty much. It really changes things up. Like a lot of the swinging around in the game is derived from the fact that platforms are just out of reach for a normal jump, so you have to use your lure to grapple over there somehow. But once you unlock double jump, that isn't an issue anymore most of the
Um,
time.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think they adjusted. Well, every new game adjusts the physics system and the swinging mechanics, but I think in this one
Mm-hmm.
it's the easiest and most accessible it's ever been to pull off those kind of maneuvers like swinging around on top of platforms and climbing vertical walls and that kind of thing. So I found myself, or maybe it was my mastery over the game system, not mastery, but my increasing experience with these kind of game systems by playing the other games in the series. But I found it easier to get around in this game than in any of the other ones.
Yeah, that's also true. Like of the original trilogy, I'd say Sayonara is a good place to start, but I'd also say that Fresh is a wonderful way to get into the series because just having the freedom to futz around in Fresh definitely made me better at the the older games in the series.
Agreed, yeah. And there's other concessions to maybe accessibility as well because there's other playable characters again, but this time they have extra abilities that can make it easier to get around. And they also tie
Yes.
into the crossover aspect that started in Blade
Yeah.
Strangers. So, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. The initial crossover character was available at launch was Cotton from the Magical Knight Cotton series of shmups. Um, very few of which have actually come out in the U.S. So I'm not
Mm.
sure how well known she was over here. She was sort of, what do they call those? Cute 'em ups.
Yep, cute 'em ups, cute shoot 'em ups.
Yeah,
But she's part of the Success stable, so this
yeah.
game was co-published by Success, and they put her in. I guess she is their most famous character, even though relatively unknown in the West, as you said.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you get her personality here, where she's always rabid for this particular type of sweet,
Hmm.
and she can fly on her broom a little bit,
Yeah.
so that
She's a
helps a lot.
witch, by the
Yes,
way.
yes, she's
Um,
a witch.
and her lure is her little fairy buddy
Hmm.
on a tether. And then, as part of the other half of the co-publishing arrangement with Nicholas, Curly Brace was added to the game in an
From Cave
update
Story.
from Cave Story, and she has her little Mega Man pea shooter gun,
Mm.
which can be used to stun enemies to make them easier to capture.
And like in Cave Story, you can also shoot below you to give you a little boost in the air as well.
Yes, I
Um,
forgot about that. That would have come in handy.
and yeah, the quirk about this is that Nicholas wasn't involved with the PC port specifically. So if you do buy this
Yeah.
game on Steam, for a long time it didn't even have an English localization because Nicholas handed that end of the partnership as well for publishing on consoles.
Hmm.
But quite recently, Success have gone through and done their own English localization. It's not good though. It's really amateurish and sort of first draft feeling. There's a lot of like unlocalized stuff, like you know, for minor examples, the cats all say "nyan," and all the apostrophes have a large space after them.
Yeah.
And I don't think the font even has a full stop in it. So a lot of
Yeah.
the text is really stilted, but
Yeah,
hey,
it's
it's
very
playable.
machine translatey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's playable and you get the gist of what's going on.
Also, if you buy
Um,
it on PC, you don't have to support Nicholas.
yeah, that's big plus.
They're not good.
Um, the fact that localization was even an issue when we haven't brought it up at all in previous entries is because this one has a full story to
Yeah,
it.
exactly. That's probably my favorite feature of this new game, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is like the first game in the series to have a big story, and it starts out with Kawase talking about how when she was a kid, she would imagine this town of I've actually only played the console version, so it's called Kingness in the console version.
On PC, it's called
Uh,
Kinnis.
okay. And she would draw maps of this town and talk about the townspeople and stuff. And she thought it was something she completely made up. And then she arrived there one day as an
Mm.
adult on her journeys. And she was like, what the fuck? And she kind of wants to know what's up with this town that she thought she'd made up as a little kid and has a map to.
Yeah, so that's the premise as set up by the opening cutscene, but should we issue a spoiler warning?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a thing I've seen other podcasts do, and in the YouTube version of this, we will put up a timestamp
Mm.
for where you can come back when we're done talking about spoilers.
If you're editing, you can
So,
insert a little voice clip of you saying the time code as well.
ooh, that's true. I can do that as well. Yeah.
Mm.
All right, you can rejoin us at the hour and 37-minute mark. But yeah, so there is definitely more going on in this town than it first appears when you start out the game.
Well, first of all, everyone who lives here is a kind of animal person, which hasn't really been
Yes.
a feature of the game series
Um,
before, apart from the fish with legs, I guess.
the intro kind of implies that people outside of this town were animal people as well.
Mm.
But this also kind of plays into the whole how much of this is Kawase like daydreaming through life and escaping reality while going about real things. Um, so yeah, so like the proprietress of the inn she ends up staying at is like a fox woman,
Mm.
and a bunch of the villagers around are like pigs and cat people.
Yeah, and the setup for what you do in the game is that Kawase takes a job at this inn as a deliverer, and she takes food to all these other characters in the game, and that's how you meet them, and that's how
Hmm.
you get your tasks of traversal through the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and the surreal platformy nature of the world is actually part of the story in this one because the castle is floating up in the air and there's floating land masses and stuff. And that's an actual terrain feature here because part of the happenings in the town is that like 20 some odd years ago the castle rose up into the sky and the chasms underneath started having demons pour out of them, and now they're just floating terrain in these spooky caverns down below, and the townsfolk are just trying to make do and deal with the situation. And stuff starts acting up again once Kawase arrives. And she starts having weird dreams that might not just be dreams that imply that she's been here before and might have had something to do with what's going on.
And the queen of this land has insight into magic seals and recognizes that Kawase has some magic attached to her.
Yeah. And yeah, and her example of these seals is Kawase's backpack. She's like, yeah, magic seals, like the one on your backpack. And Kawase's like, what? And the queen's like, what? You didn't think that was just a magic backpack, right? You can stuff anything in there. Come on. It's got a seal on it. Uh,
Yeah, later on you rescue a piglet girl and put her, or she turns up, she's been sleeping in your backpack. And then later on you stuff her in there to extract her from somewhere.
yeah. And like, okay, I'm just gonna get into what I was ranting about on Discord the other
Go
day.
for it.
So so as you progress through the story and things start coming to a head, like Kawase is having memories of this older gruff fox guy who helped her out with something as a kid, and then she finds out that this guy is the husband of the proprietress of the inn she's been working at. The proprietress named Sylvie, and her husband's name is Gin. They're both, silver foxes. Get it? Gin and Sylvie. And it's implied she's been here before and had to leave for some reason. And there's like a voice warning her off that something's gonna bad is gonna happen again if she doesn't get out of town. and Gin has been missing,
He went
and
off on an important
Sylvie's,
mission and is missing.
yeah,
Yeah.
he went off an important mission in the mountains and disappeared. And it had something to do with Kawase's sister, who is missing, presumed dead.
Because in her
And
dark nightmares, she starts hearing this voice saying, "Sister."
yeah, and if all of this sounds kind of familiar, it's because, at least to my ear, this sounded a lot like that brooding backstory that was up on the blog but never actually made it into the games, with, you know, Kawase accidentally ending up working at her mother's restaurant, but neither of them knew that they were mother and daughter. And she has a sister who's missing that nobody talks about, and her dad disappeared one day. And I was like, oh my god, this is going to be it. They're actually putting this in a game. They're codifying it, and they're, they've changing some story details, because that backstory was written like 20 some odd years ago, or 25 years ago, and never actually made it into any of these games, but they've kind of alluded to it in like Blade Strangers and stuff. And you end up going and finding Gin at the bottom of the chasm next to the portal where the demons have been coming out, and there's a confrontation with the boss, which turns out to have been Kawase's missing sister, Harami, who's just been kind of trapped down here this whole time. And and then they don't pull the trigger on the story beats I was expecting that.
I guess, much like the earlier games in the series, it just kind of ends when you were expecting some more stuff to
Yeah,
happen.
like you rescue your sister and Gin and go home, and it just, like, after the boss fight's over, it sort of transitions to like the quote unquote real world, where Kawase's on the phone with someone who could be her mother,
Maybe.
and uh reminiscing about that time she got spirited away as a kid, which coincided with her sister going missing.
Name drop.
And like, they mention like the silver foxes who live in the woods nearby,
You even see a shot of them. Yeah.
the shrine that she turned up at, like, burnt down the other day under mysterious circumstances. And but then, like, the person she's talking to asks if she can come back to the village and do more deliveries, and you're like, wait, is she talking to Sylvie, or is she talking to her mom, or is her mom Sylvie like I thought? What's going on? Just answer my questions, please. Oh.
So yeah, it's like either all in Kawase's subconscious, or she was transported to a weird spirit world, or a mix of both somehow.
Yeah, and it's just the lore and tone of this series is all over the place. We went from dark brooding backstory for bubbly game Kirby style to there's now time traveling future sci-fi cops and stuff going on there, to Miyazaki's Spirited Away.
Yeah, pretty much just
to,
that. Yeah.
like, it's a bit all over the place.
That's what makes it cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were saying how you were disappointed they didn't follow through and really hammer out that story itself in the game, but I kind of like that it's a bit vague and open to interpretation. I didn't realize a lot of this stuff until we actually had a conversation about it, which is a cool experience in and of itself, I think.
Yeah.
Because that kind of stuff is there to be picked up on. I do think I agree with you on some level that I would have liked a bit more of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as the first story in an Umihara Kawase game, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I like that it sort of reinterprets a lot of those older plot threads that were never like official, but was all the fan base had to go off of. In sort of a more Miyazaki type story that makes it a bit less grimdark and gives a happy ending with, like, hey, all the family's back together. Because like the ending in the real world shows that Harami's back now,
Yeah.
and Gin has recovered and is back in later games, um, and like, yeah, like the family's back together, and Kawase's still wandering around, but she can go home now
Hmm.
with a clear conscience and stuff, because it's
Uh,
implied that in this version of events, the reason she left home and started traveling was because she kind of felt like all of this was her fault and she couldn't go home anymore.
hmm.
So
But as we said from materials in Sayonara, saying how she only had hazy memories of her childhood, that ties in with this, how she doesn't really remember being to Kinnis before.
yeah,
There's a wrinkle in the game where there's one cat character. Oh, by the way, Shakamaru is in this game as a
yeah,
humanoid cat
yeah,
camper for some reason. So that's a kind of tie to the real world again. But
yeah.
later it's
That
established that the humanoid cats can transform into cats. They don't really explain that either.
yeah. One
Um,
of the other cat campers, when he's explaining, like, sort of what's actually going on to her, has sort of a like, oh, I've said too much and the magic's fading sort of moment, and turns into a regular cat.
yeah,
And she takes him back to the inn to kind of go, oh my god, Kotaru turned into a regular cat. What the hell do I do? And Sylvie's like, oh hey, it's our family cat. He's been missing for years. What happened to him? And it's
and he's
like,
in
wait,
the
what the
photo
fuck?
of the younger Sylvie
Yeah,
again.
yeah. And it's like, okay, there is a cat villager named Shakamaru, which is the name of Kawase's childhood friend's family cat. Is
Mm,
that actually Shakamaru? Like, what's going on
yeah,
here?
but there's some kind of mechanism there for
Yeah,
animals to turn into animal people.
that was
So
another reason I expected all of this to tie together with the
mm,
backstory. Was like, they don't just. That's an important. Shakamaru is an important character in the series. They don't just randomly choose one of the cat villagers to call that name and not have it be significant, right?
mm,
But then it's just open ended and never followed up on.
yeah, and you see Sylvie and Gin as foxes in their epilogue, and like, what does this mean? I'm still
Yeah,
not sure.
yeah.
The other weird thing is that so Cotton and Curly are there as guest characters. You can use them to make missions a little bit easier if you're having trouble with them, especially the challenge missions, which is a whole extra page of super tough challenge levels.
Yes.
But
I have not managed to do any of them. I tried.
I can only do them as Cotton when I can fly. I played the PC version,
Mm,
so I had this janky translation and didn't have access to Curly either because that comes with the Nicholas partnership. So them not being involved in the PC version means Curly's not there. But Cotton and Curly both have their own quests in the mission mode as well.
yeah, little
They,
side stories.
yeah, little stories where they do their own thing. But at the end of Curly's story, how it ends is she gets pulled back into the whatever world by the motes, which are the sentient computers from Blade Strangers.
Yeah.
So maybe the whole thing is in the virtual reality digital world or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's weird. Like I liked seeing the continuity there. I thought kind of Blade Strangers was
Yes.
going to be a one-off and they weren't going to talk about that again except maybe in like Blade Strangers 2 in 5 years or something. So having the motes show up and go, "So this is where you got off to." Crap. Um don't worry about it. We're erasing your memories again. Get back here. Was like, "Wait, what?" uh, because the basic setup for Blade Strangers is you have these sort of Evangelion-ish computer, faceless computer entities, kind of.
Yeah, they're actually fun because they're
Yeah,
comic relief.
yeah, they're comic relief. They keep screwing up, and they're the ones pulling in all these crossover characters to be the next quote unquote Blade Stranger, who will be their character they send to various worlds to check up on them and make sure everything's okay.
Is that what the role of the Blade Stranger was? I thought it was just to kill the
Um,
rampaging, mad, rampant computer who was trying to
Well,
eat the
like in
world.
in some of the endings, it's like cool. Now that you've stopped her and everything's back to normal, you can progress on your Blade Stranger mission of going out
Oh,
and
okay.
being a sort of not necessarily overseer, but like our representative to kind of make sure things are okay.
Huh.
So yeah,
See, we're still learning new things
yeah.
about the plot of this weird series. Um,
And that shows up in Fresh, and it was like, oh
yeah,
wait, what?
yeah,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that's what Fresh is. It's really a mixed bag in so many ways. A lot of odd things, good decisions, interesting new wrinkles, but also kind of misguided decisions. Some, diehard fans have problems with it. I think it's really cool, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of mixed.
I was kind of asking about it on Kawase fans Discord the other day, kind of
Mm,
going, "Hey, I have all these questions and discussion I want to have about Fresh, but like a lot of them have only played the PC release or only played in Japanese
mm.
or haven't played at all because they don't like the price point because it is a full-priced game."
Even more than full
Um,
price. It is a bit of a barrier how expensive it is on certain
and
marketplaces.
and unlike many niche fandoms, the fans of this one aren't made of money, which is understandable because some of this stuff gets really pricey.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, even within the Umihara Kawase fandom, Fresh and its follow-up spin-off haven't really gotten a lot of talk at all.
Wow. Let's talk about the follow up, the most recent thing
Yeah.
that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Umihara Kawase
Umihara
Bazooka.
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 And I say it weird because they capitalize it weird.
Well, true.
Um,
There's a capital Z, and there's also an exclamation mark.
Yeah, it's capital Z and a capital K. It's
Oh, is that? Gosh.
Bazooka! Exclamation point.
Cool.
And I totally believe this game started out as something else before becoming an Umihara game.
Why is that?
Just because of so. First of all, it's a big crossover platform fighter. I'd say in the vein of Smash Bros, but it's not really anything like Smash Bros at all.
Agreed.
But vaguely it's a platform fighter that
Yeah.
has a bunch of crossover characters in it. But it has like half dozen original characters in it,
5.
and those original characters are part of or tangential to this little group called the Bazooka Club, headed up by like the character named Daichi, who and they have their little bazooka club thing going on, and just from they seem like a stereotypical sort of like visual novel or anime cast of characters where you have like the main shonen lead and love interest and younger female comic relief friend and like the little demon that annoys them and stuff like that, and like the young witch in training because this is a Kondo game and there has to be a young witch in training. And like they seem good, and on the credits page for the game there's silhouettes of concept art that isn't of anyone discernible in the final game, but you can kind
Oh.
of see how that might be like older concept art from a previous version of this, and you
Okay.
can see like one of the characters has a long grapple thing that maybe that evolved into how the Umihara stuff got roped into this, because like it's all built on the Fresh engine and reuses a lot of Fresh assets. So I wonder if it was like being built in Fresh since they had an engine lying around, and then just ended up being a spin-off.
Yeah,
Because
it's an
it
interesting
kinda got,
theory.
yeah.
I would give it credence for sure. Along with that, the Bazooka Club, the bazooka in the title, there's this new bazooka mechanic that's really
Yeah.
central to how, I guess, combat works in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But they've also imported basically all the mechanics from Umihara Kawase itself in and created this
Yeah.
new mix of them. So the bazooka thing is basically when you send out your lure and pull something into your backpack, at that point it becomes a projectile, which you can store one of, and you shoot it out as a bazooka, an explosive thing that bounces around. And yeah, that's on top of the multiplayer, like you said, which takes the form of this sort of platform fighter. There's a single player mode that takes the form of more a single screen arcade kind of level progression thing where you fight off waves of enemies using this bazooka thing. You pull in a fish, you shoot it and kill all the other fish, and then you move on. So,
but it's also got like traditional Umihara Kawase bosses. You fight the giant tadpole, contractually obligated to appear in every end of the series, even in Blade Strangers.
Emiko summons it. We didn't actually mention the bosses in Fresh, but there's a new system for them that I really liked where you can do damage to them by grappling them with your lure and keeping it on them for a time, and it does damage over time. And then when you release it, it's another like impact. And that's carried over as well as the bazooka system of doing damage.
And so it's got a single player challenge mode progression thing that Milo mentioned that's like I can do basic math. It's like 36 stages long.
Isn't it 10 times 40 including bosses?
Is it 10 times?
Is it 9 or 10?
Or is it
anyway.
9? I think it's 9. It's somewhere between 30 and 40 levels. They goes through the 4 areas of Fresh that it uses as the backdrops and assets for these stages. The sort of base layer, the castle stuff up in the clouds, the caves area, and then the closer to hell area. Which I'm glad those are back, because I thought some of those were actually kind of underutilized in Fresh, and I wanted to see more of it. So seeing more of it is cool. But like there's a host of other characters. Cotton's back. A couple of Cotton's supporting cast members are in. Paya from Doki Doki Piacho is back after her guest appearance in Blade Strangers.
And 2 other Piacho characters too.
She brings other Piacho characters with her. Solange from Coda Princess is not in this one, surprisingly. But a bunch of other obscure Japanese indie characters are.
I think it's mostly from Success's line of IPs, the publisher.
There's like a cat-themed wrestler and
Sonic Cat. She's an alien. That's her persona.
A like demon hunter from an Otome game.
Uzuki Senba.
I actually kind of want to play that after reading up on it. They're the dog from the Metal Saga series, which is a legally distinct spin-off of the Metal Max main franchise. Specifically, the ones Success publishes are the Metal Saga entries in that franchise. I didn't know he was from that. I thought he was grouped together with the Bazooka Club members as, like, the dog mascot.
No, he's a dog with a cannon strapped to his back.
I mean, but everybody else in the game has cannons too. So.
There's also Ariel Sinclair, the mayor from Shepherd's Crossing, which is kind of a Japanese Farmville thing. And the weirdest character of all, Dozel, who is just a Japanese YouTuber. He's in the game as himself. It's really weird.
He's not even the one Japanese social media person I'd expect to be in this series.
But yeah, you're saying apart from that, there's Umihara Kawase characters. Emiko and Noko are back. Kawase's there.
Yeah, but they also bring in some characters from Fresh, and it's nice to see like the original trilogy characters interacting with some of the Fresh cast. So you get like the Queen and Sylvian Gin. And
the Queen is a cow lady, by the way.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not questioning it.
No, it's fine.
I'm kind of a little, now that I've beaten Fresh, I'm a little baffled that Harame's not here. But
agreed. I wondered if that would be too much of a spoiler, maybe, but it would have been really cool.
Isn't Gin kind of a spoiler? I mean, they say his little character profile is, this is Sylvie's husband, but like he doesn't really come into play till late in
You're
Fresh,
right.
So I guess him just kind of showing up doesn't necessarily spoil anything, but
because I read some of the Bazooka character bios before playing Fresh, so I guess I didn't realize that Gin was supposed to be a reveal in the game, so I guess I spoiled myself.
I was going to comment that like there's no story to this at all. We just had like
Right.
two Kawase appearances that had tons of story and character development and depiction and lots of lore drops to nothing. Um, some of the Kawase fan members commented that paying full price for what could have been a DLC add-on to Fresh
Hmm.
was what's kind of kept them from diving into this a whole lot.
Yeah,
And
also
I can
the
kind of see what
multiplayer
where
scene
they're
has
coming
kind of
from.
evaporated if it even ever existed.
Yeah, there's networked online multiplayer,
Hmm.
and I have never gotten a hit off of it.
And it's not even cross-platform, unfortunately.
Yeah, we mentioned that Fresh was getting an arcade release, and it's like, why? Why isn't Bazooka the one getting an arcade release? It's an arcade game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's both
but
it's two kinds of arcade game, the platform fighter and it's the single screen, like that whole thing as well.
yeah.
Um I remember what I was going to say before, by the way, which is that it's
Oh,
weird that
okay.
some characters in Fresh are just kind of animals that stand upright and wear clothes, but some are like the three characters
Yeah,
that are playable are humans with animal ears, basically. Different kinds of
they kind
anthropomorphization.
of lampshade that too a bit. Because like at one point Kawase is collecting pigs to use as ingredients and accidentally scoops up a villager. And everyone's
Yes.
like, "Why would you do that?" And Kawase's just like, "I what?" Kawase's just like to herself, "I can't say that I can't tell the difference out loud. That would be incredibly rude." But like in Curly's little side campaign, everyone assumes Curly is related to Kawase because they're the only two like normal humans they've ever seen.
Yes. But Curly's a chalk white robot person, not
Yeah,
really
but
a
you
human.
know, we all look the same to them. Um, like, yeah, like it's kind of lampshaded and
Mm.
then not really gotten into, and the ending throws more confusion powder into the mix. Um,
So, since Bazooka has no in game story, what's your take on the events there? What is happening?
yeah, I don't know. All I can really go off of is the only indication of any story is actually with the little character profiles for the Bazooka Club
Mm.
members and related characters, in that like there's some school, they have an extracurricular Bazooka Club. There's this little succubus girl terrorizing Daichi and friends, and yeah, that's like a typical little light novel setup.
But it's
um,
from the, environments seen in the game, it's clearly taking place in the world of Fresh.
yeah,
So I guess they all went there somehow. The same. How about so the same way that Kawase got spirited away? All these dozen characters also had the same thing happen for
but
some
also
reason.
like Kawase was obviously able to
Mm.
just like take the train there before Fresh began.
Yeah.
So like she wandered in. So you can go there?
So maybe it's just a
Yeah.
place you can just go. Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't make any attempt to explain why they're there. That's the thing.
No, it doesn't. And yeah, I don't know. I'd be interesting in tunneling into the Steam files and seeing if there's any cut content that might
Hmm.
shed some light on that. But the series having no story is the norm for the series, so Fresh was an oddity in that
Fair
respect.
enough. I
So
appreciated it though. That's the state of the series as it is now. Bazooka came out quite recently, and it's the latest installment.
yeah.
I'm really happy that the series is getting the resurgence that it is now because these new
Mm-hmm.
games have been really interesting in their own ways,
Mm-hmm.
mechanically among other things.
And I hope they do well, and Saizen-sen continues to be able to put stuff out and give things English localizations as well.
Hmm.
So they seem to have cut ties with Nicholas, which might hinder localization efforts a little bit,
Hmm.
since Nicholas seemed to be doing most of the heavy lifting there.
Bazooka's localization was quite good thanks to Inin.
Yes. Although I hear Inan also has some issues, but nowhere
Ugh.
near what Nicholas was. So,
Hmm. Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Ugh. There's so many like awful publishers out there.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Unfortunate, really. But yeah. Um,
But at least there's, passion for the series and the characters in the world at
mm-hmm.
Saizen-sen at least, especially with
Yeah.
Kondo at the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives me hope for continuation.
Yeah. What with Bazooka coming out last year and the arcade version of Fresh coming out last year, they're still actively working on
Hmm.
stuff,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be at all surprised if another entry pops up in the next couple of years.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
But what we have already amounts to a really, interesting series that has sort of
yeah,
hovered around cult classic status for a long time, but just kept on ticking along. And
it's
yeah,
yeah. I was talking to my brother and talking about how sort of well known but not well known this series is
mm,
at the same time. Like this is sort of a good segue into like the related works section of
yep,
our schedule, because there was originally going to be a PS2 release in this franchise.
mm,
um maybe not like an actual like direct Umihara Kawase game, but there was a tech demo released on one of those demo discs, and it wasn't even a playable tech demo. It was one of the videos, and it was for a project called Densen, which roughly means power line, and it was a 3D title, and it was certainly tech demo. It was a young like urban girl in like a seifuku or sort of casual seifuku-ish clothes, traveling around, floating urban weird landscapes as
mm.
as Umihara Kawase does. Um,
It kind of reminded me of the Milkman chapter in Psychonauts.
yeah, it does kind of remind of that. In that it's these weird urban environments with like lawns and fencing and yards and power poles and stuff, and she gets around these floating bits of suburbia via riding the power lines with a coat hanger. And some of the power lines are connected to like telephone poles and power poles as normal, and some of them go twisting around like grind rails in a Sonic stage. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, and even though this was never released, it was shown off at a trade expo at some point, and it's
yeah,
become this sort of legendary thing, almost like Jodorowsky's Dune, where it didn't happen, but it being developed and being shown to other people in the industry inspired them in various ways.
yeah. It's directly cited as the inspiration for both Katamari Damacy and Eco.
Yeah,
And it's like,
and
wait,
those are
what?
two big names of
Yeah.
really interesting, like, not voyeur. Um, what's the word for like an artist who, a creative who?
Novu? I don't know.
Sorry,
No, Art Nouveau,
no,
maybe
no.
something. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce stuff.
Like when a director has a vision for something, and God, I'm sorry.
But yeah, it's just very influential. Been around, like at least in Japan. I get the impression that like it's one of those titles that people will have heard of, but not necessarily have played themselves, if that makes sense. But in addition to a canceled entry,
Hmm.
there's also just some other stuff. I mentioned that Kawase showed up in another crossover with some Nicholas properties, and that was the game Crystal Crisis, which was supposed to be sort of a companion piece to Blade Strangers, as sort of a spiritual successor to the old Puzzle Fighters games.
Sorry, I remember the word. It's auteur.
Ah, okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Um,
Katamari and Aiko are auteur-driven games.
oh
Anyway, go on.
God, aren't they? And so she shows up in that. She was a very late entry to that game. She's not in any of the concept artwork and doesn't have really any story or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't really include it on the list of major entries the way we did Blade Strangers. Um, but we also mentioned earlier that there was a bunch of Dojin works and a official Umihara Kawase manga
Hmm.
that Milo has looked into a lot more than I have. So I'm gonna let him jump on that one a bit.
Yeah, well, the manga was being put out at the same time as the original game, presumably as part of NHK's marketing push for it. They got Shoma Yamabuki to do this manga, which is serialized in Comic Burger over 1995 in 8 installments. You said before they had a tankobon. Unfortunately, the tankobon only covers the first 6 chapters, and then it has like this random bonus chapter of an unrelated work. So I don't know why they didn't wait and put the other 2 in there, because as a result, the last 2 chapters are lost to time in history. We've never seen them. We have no access to the magazines that they were printed in, and there was no volume 2. So the story is kind of unfinished de facto. It was finished, but we've never seen it. We won't see it.
I kind of wonder if it got axed because that just reeks of like we fully intended there to be at least a second volume. But
Yeah, that's a good point. But I want to see how the story ends, because the story of Yamabuki's manga is really interesting, and it diverges from the games, which, as we said, didn't really have a story. In this one, Kawase is some kind of mutant mermaid creature who I guess the implication is that she was experimented on, because later on they do these like fish mutant hybrid creatures. So for some reason she can breathe underwater and swim really well and stuff like that. But she has this sort of mystery around her past, and like her father was an oceanographer and scientist and stuff, and she meets this other guy whose father is also missing because he was in a submarine accident or something, and like this evil organization with a giant technologically advanced ship has these mutant fish creatures, and they're after her for some reason. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I like the designs. It kind of reminds me of Dengeki Pikachu, the manga that sort of adapted the Pokemon anime. What was the guy's name who did that? Anyway, in the way that the technology and creatures are kind of presented in it. But yeah, apart from that manga, they also got Yamabuki to do a short manga chapter in the official guidebook for the first game. So there's a 40-page manga, and this is a little sneaky plug because I imported a copy of that and then scanned it and translated the whole thing, so you can go read that. You can't really you can read the first 6 chapters of the full manga as well, but that hasn't been translated. I was kind of waiting to get the last 2 chapters before I have a crack at it. But this Gaiden chapter is kind of fun too, because Kawase meets a Zeuglodon or a Basilosaurus, and there's like ancient pirate treasure, and it's all very exciting. Yes, so that's that. The back page of the Hypertechnique guidebook that I mentioned also kind of advertises that the comic version of Kawase will continue in the form of Dojin magazines in some way, but we've never been able to track down those ones in particular. So that's kind of a big mystery too. But we do have the other Dojin works that we've talked about that Kondo put out that continued to fund the series. And you've imported some of those, so why don't you say what was in those?
Yeah, Kondo had a Dojin imprint, I don't know what the correct word is, line called Stray Sheep that he would put out and sell at cons, and it occasionally had some side things like Black Sheep, and they were to advertise his own manga that he was writing, as well as have art for games and productions he was involved in, plus just some fan art of other things. And a lot of the Umihara Kawase related content in it is just sketches and concept art. and stuff of the characters. There's not really any manga or anything meaty in there. There's a lot of Doki Doki Poyacho content. One volume is just entirely dedicated to it, with reams of concept art and interviews with the staff and the voice actors for characters and stuff. And I believe that one's like got an almost official subtitle on it, because it's the closest thing you're gonna get. And yeah, I imported a bunch of those. I might do some scans later at some point.
Would you say there's anything in there that gives any insight into, the characters and the world of the games?
No, not that I've seen
well.
just from the art. Maybe if they're like, a lot of it's just art with no accompanying text or notes or anything. But I don't know. I've only sort of glanced through it because I've been busy with work lately. But I will sit down and give everything a more discerning eye.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, anyway, that makes sense because that was Kondo's role in the series at that time, just character designer.
Yeah.
So the series having this cult classic status, as we've talked about, kind of led to it inspiring some other Doujin games. So
yes,
we actually have 3 entries in this kind of inspired by Umihara Kawase games category. One that I found was called Ganbare Natsuki-San. This was made by Alpha Secret Base, and it kind of reuses a character that they had put in an earlier game they did, which was a Sokoban clone. So now they're doing an Umihara Kawase clone, but it's not quite a clone. It heavily homages the original game's aesthetics, with the blocky game map and the backgrounds being digitized photos and stuff like that. But instead of the rubbering wire thing, it's this anchor system where you can grapple onto the surfaces, but it becomes a rigid structure that then you can rotate. So it's kind of a different mechanic, but inspired by and sort of parallel to the gameplay mechanics of Umihara Kawase. It's really interesting. And it was released on the XBLA for Xbox 360, as well as being a freeware Doujin thing. Although it's hard to play these days because it's old and it doesn't really work on modern computers. But there was a fan sort of port of it. But even that's difficult to get going because you need to compile it from its GitHub source. And that's a real pain in the ass.
Nice.
Anyway. So how did you find this other one?
I'm in a couple different Umihara Kawase discords. The speedrun.net discord has sections for this and the other entry on our list. So the next one is Kabanchan Turari, and it is in theming, it's a Kimono Friends fan game. Kimono Friends being an anime manga light novel series with like animal people and stuff in it.
I wasn't familiar with the series until Jupiter did a Picross game based on it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I also found out that the famous Grape-kun, the penguin, fell in love with the anime cutout, and that was a Kimono Friends character that the penguin fell in love with.
I didn't know she was from that.
Yeah.
So in execution, it's kind of a cross between Shun and Sayonara. What I'm told by the speedrunning Discord is that it's got Shun's sort of physics engine, or a facsimile of Shun's physics, but the graphics are much closer to Sayonara.
I think the characters are still sprites, though.
Are they? I'm not sure.
I thought it looked pretty similar to Shun, but
either way, I can't get super far in it because it's one of those games made for people who are already good at the series it's a fan game of.
I got a decent way into it.
Or I'm just bad at these, but
It's hard. No, it is really hard. But at least it doesn't have enemies and it doesn't have moving platforms or
Yeah, it's
other
got spikes all over the
complications like
place.
that. But the other cool thing it does is it splits up its levels into categories. So all the hard
Yeah.
ones are in their own category. I can do most of the normal ones. And there's also a
Okay.
tutorial section that teaches you the mechanics, maybe a bit more thoroughly than Shun did,
Hmm.
possibly. Yeah, it's a really good replication of the engine of a Kawase game, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it plays well.
And involved in this one was a person who's heavily involved in the Japanese fan scene. He put out a few Dojin works about Fresh that I have talked with some people about, like a little character encyclopedia and a like history of speedrunning the Umihara Kawase series, and a little like fan trivia questions and answer book.
Mm.
Um, and I guess he did some QA and design work on this, and the next thing on our list, which is the Hook Girl games. I'm unclear if Hook Girls had distinct entries or if it's like Lucky Tale, where like Super and New Super are just ports and remakes.
Uh,
Um,
no, Super. They have this. They work the same in gameplay, but they have a different set of levels. Super Hook Girl
mm, okay.
um, has a global time limit to it, but in New Super Hook Girl, each stage has a time limit on its own.
Mm.
So yeah.
So yeah, the Hook Girl games are much more action oriented. They're long actiony levels that you pull yourself through as fast as possible while not dying.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. How would you describe them?
Um, yeah, really fast paced, just action grappling, um,
Yeah.
and yeah, not as much trying to uh, homage Umihara Kawase as the last two fan games we talked about, but it is taking
Yeah.
the grapple system and expanding on that with momentum and some puzzling as well.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more fast paced. Yeah.
Yeah. Unlike other fast-paced grapple games, it has like the same sort of rope physics and stuff that Umihara Kawase does. They're just used in this fast-paced environment.
Hmm.
Um, and it does have some people from the Umihara Kawase fan scene involved in them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wish they had a translation though, because there's a lot of text in between levels. Apparently,
Yeah, I
they're
get the
invested
impression
in
there's a rich story going on that I just over my
supposedly. Yeah,
head.
they're apparently pretty invested in these characters because there's been on top of the merch and the soundtrack CDs, there's a whole adventure game about interacting with the characters.
Wild.
Yeah, yeah. I think that wraps up our coverage. Now we've been going a long time, which is fine because this
Yeah.
is a spin-off episode, really.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think to sum up, I would say that I made some specious connections to the Donkey Kong series earlier, but the Umihara Kawase series does scratch some of the same itches of what I love about Donkey Kong in the arcade era, which is being a little vague on story and open to interpretation, which lets us fill in gaps and make connections ourselves and having some
Yeah, yeah.
depth to that. And the puzzle platforming as well, and sort of
Mhm.
mastering movement mechanics to get through challenges like that is
Yeah.
similar as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
and fun
I
characters.
generally agree with that.
Hmm.
Fun cast, nice theory crafting going on.
Yeah, but
Interesting
hey,
gameplay.
we can do theory crafting with anything, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure we could. Hmm. Let's see. Before we sign off for this episode,
Yeah, we'll be back with more
we
Donkey
sh-
Kong stuff next week. Next episode.
yeah, yeah, don't overpromise. Let's do some plugs. What's your plug? for this episode?
Well, I have something of my own to plug for once, but it is relevant to what we've been talking about. In a way, this whole episode was my plug of Umihara Kawase. But after playing all the games in the series, including the fan games and stuff, I went and did, in my typical style, a pixel art drawing of the cast.
Yes.
So that's my plug, and you can go to my DeviantArt and check out all the playable characters from the series. And there's a lot of them, especially thanks to Bazooka, which ballooned out the crossover cast. Yeah.
My plug is some Alien franchise tie-in novels. Alien, the horror sci-fi series. By one author in particular, Alex White, who previously wrote The Cold Forge, which is the best Alien tie-in novel, period. Just hands down. Like, after reading it, I actually lost appreciation for some other novels because they don't take into account the amount of detail that The Cold Forge does.
Wow.
It's just really, really, really good. I'd recommend it to all Alien fans. But his next Alien novel, Into Charybdis, just came out, like, yesterday.
Oh.
So I haven't read it yet. The thick-ass hardcover is sitting next to me. It's like 2.5 inches thick.
Whoa.
I'm going to enjoy diving into that, but I'm sure it's going to be great if it's even approaching the excellence that Cold Forge was.
Nice.
So Cold Forge takes place sort of concurrently / kinda after Aliens, in that it's a research facility that was in contact with Carter Burke, and they've been sent some alien eggs. They don't know where they're from. They've just been told to futz around with them. And things go horribly. They're under audit, and while they are under audit, things start going wrong. It's really well done, and Alex seems to really, really get this universe and the creatures in ways that other authors don't. As an added bonus, the main character is a disabled POC trans man.
Wow, cool.
Named Blue, who, due to various circumstances, has sort of grown up operating via a male android body by remote, and no longer identifies with their biological female body much. That is disabled. And they are the main character, or the main protagonist, I guess. There's other main characters. But Mr. Grey is an asshole and deserves everything that comes to him by the end of the book.
Is it a coincidence that that's kind of like Avatar?
You know what? It could be, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was intentional.
Yeah, because that started as an Aliens spec script.
It started as an Alien 3 spec script, but yes.
Sure.
And then Into Charybdis is about a little military team being sent into this abandoned facility called Charybdis, which has a bit of it's like out in the middle of an oceany area. And there's aliens involved, and everything's going to go horribly wrong, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to it. But
well, yeah, it's good that you're getting new works in the Alien series, because there was a bit of a worry when Fox was bought out by Disney, right?
There
things were being
was more than a bit of a worry. They actively canceled everything.
Yeah.
They have started up, like, the novels and comics didn't stop, but all of the like telemedia stopped. But they haven't a new Predator film has been announced, and there's going to be an Aliens mini series, like an HBO series or something. So we're getting more.
That's good.
Yeah. So I'm still worried, but it's is the stuff we're getting going to be good? Are they going to ruin it? Sort of worry, rather than we're never going to get anything ever again worry. So yeah. So those are my plugs.
Bit like Star Wars.
Yeah. Oh God.
Good plug. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that'll do it for
yeah.
this episode. Running long.
Yep.
But that's all right.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, if you did. I had a lot of fun
Yeah.
talking about this. This series is amazing, and go check it out.
Yeah, yeah, do it. Why are you still listening to us? Go play the games. You should have turned this off like an hour ago and just gone and bought one of them.
But we'll be back at you with more arcade era goodness next time.
Yep.
Until then, I've been Milo.
And I continue to be Gibbon somehow.
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 One day we'll find out how.
One day. Okay.
Okay, bye.